film, Karnit Mandel. Karnit, thank you for joining. And to lead this conversation, I'm honored to welcome Najla Saeed. Najla, thank you so much.
Hi. Thank you so much. That was, I think I need a few hours to digest what I just saw. But just as I'm half Palestinian, half Lebanese. My mother's from Beirut. I grew up in New York and on the Upper West Side, but my family in Beirut was 2 blocks from the PLO headquarters. I have family and friends who are sort of involved in that arena, Institute for Palestine Studies. So seeing that stuff and seeing my neighborhood in Humro, and it was just bizarre because I was a little girl there. I had no idea what was going on. But thank you, that was stunning. The first thing I was actually just curious about was before you came upon the archives, not necessarily what your political stance was, but what was your knowledge of these stories, this lost narrative? I don't personally know. I know a lot of Israelis, but the levels of awareness are very different. So I was just curious about your background and that.
Thank you for asking this question. It's really interesting because usually what people ask me is, how did you find the material? And it's a bit boring question. So I am what you call in Israel a leftist. I read Benny Morris when he was still on our side.
Yeah, I know.
I can say I'm a leftist since I remember myself, but the minute I saw the first film, when I sat in the IDF archive, and the first film I saw was the Battle of Karame. And I realized what I'm saying in the film, that what you see is not what you know. I mean, I knew there were refugee camps, but you don't know it until you see it, especially if you're a very visual person. It doesn't mean anything to you if you don't see it. For me, if I don't see the photos, it's like a story. And the first thing I felt at that moment, I mean, it took a long while before I actually realized I'm going to make a film about it. I had no idea what I'm going to do about it, but the first thing was what I felt was that I have to get it out of here. And I just said, it's not fair that we as Israelis saw so much of other things and we haven't seen this. I want people to see this. And I was thinking about Israelis, not about Palestinians. But actually, now I feel different. I want Palestinians to see it because I'm sorry if I hurt anyone's feelings, but at the moment I don't believe it will change anything in Israel. So, I mean, I just want to... I know that when Palestinians see this film, it means a lot to them. So I want to distribute it to Palestinians. But at that moment, I was just... I want Israelis to see it. So it made a big difference for me because, well, actually it's not so easy to answer this question because it took like more than 10 years to complete the film. And during that time, I also had relationship with Palestinians that, I mean, I had a crisis with that because when I started, every Palestinian I met wanted to help me. And then they started disappearing, and it was extremely hard to get anyone interviewed. And it nearly, I mean, like at a certain point, and it was because of the BDS.
Oh, okay.
And when I conversed with BDS, they said, your film is not bad. Tell everyone that they can help you. We like your film. But still everyone were afraid. And what happened was that people who were helping me, and I wanted to give it to a Palestinian director. I mean, I didn't want to how do you say that, perpetuate
Right,
it. I mean, I was looking for a Palestinian director, and I was working with someone, and then one day he just stopped answering me, just like that. So it took so long. And then there was a moment where I said, okay, I have to decide if I'm doing it just with Israeli interviewees, which is a bit ridiculous, or not. And then I said, I nearly stopped, and then said, I will do it whatever I can. And then one person, Anan Barakat, who is interviewed in the film, he has an Israeli, and he just told me that he's willing to do it, he wants to do it, he wants to talk, even though he knows what the BDS will do to him. But he said, I want to talk. And he did, but he was the only one.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't even occur to me with BDS. That is and especially with the arts, it's complicated.
Yeah.
I also have talked to young Israelis who have told me that they never even saw an Arab until, they were in the army, and so I was just curious about. That's why I was sort of curious about your background and all of that. For me, it was, as a Palestinian who grew up in New York, my grandfather took Super 8 films of my dad's family, but they're not doing much. They're just kind of running toward the camera. So I have proof that my family was there, but I had never seen films of so many smiling Palestinians, which someone also commented in the film, just living, not doing anything considered angry or violent, so that was, thank you for that. I do also agree that it should be seen by Palestinians. It's quite overwhelming.
Can I say
Yes,
something
please,
about that?
you can say whatever you'd like.
Yeah, because you're on to the good points. So another decision I had to make. I mean, there were more materials than what you saw, and when I was trying to finance the film, the first question that everybody asks me is, what's in the material? What's there? And there were a few things that are document the armed struggle. Yeah. But they were expecting, I mean, I always say the same joke, but it's they were expecting to see Arafat dancing in underwear or something. They were expecting to see something really sexy, or a lot of blood, or I don't know what. And then, during, I watched the material 100 times, and then it was a long process, and then I decided to stick to the human aspect because, I mean, it was the most, most of it was the human aspect. I'm not going to tell you there were, incredible shots of other things that are not in the film. I mean, but for me, there was a moment when I realized what interests me is the human aspect. Yeah. And I think that is much, if you ask me what is so scary in this footage that Israelis don't want
That's
people to see,
my question.
it's that they're just humans. That is the most scary thing. I mean, if you see, I don't know, intelligence secrets or things like that. I mean, but the scariest thing is to see them as humans, like children and just people living normally. And they're not only terrorists, and they're, you always see them as either terrorists or victims.
Right.
Completely miserable victims. And here, they were humans, and it was exciting to see them as humans. I mean, it's just humans, just like me and you, just humans. So that is my, what I wanted to show, and my answer to what's interesting in the footage.
Right. No, it's quite beautiful. I remember I was in Berlin a few years ago, and I went to the Jewish Museum, and there was a photo of the Jewish people who had escaped the camps or escaped Europe, and they were on the deck of the boat holding hands and dancing in a circle. And I was, as a Palestinian, of course, incredibly moved because they were going to find a home, but at the same time, I was like, what about the other side? And I find this, you know, and my father, who passed away a while ago, used to talk about we have two separate histories. They're not necessarily going to come to a meeting point, but we need to acknowledge them, that we each have a different story. How have people, I do know, just from my own experience, being a New Yorker and Upper West Sider, and also engaging a lot with Israelis from Israel, that there's a very different, sometimes, response to films that are critical of Israel, depending on the audience. I just wondered if you have had experiences that surprised you or didn't, or...
The surprising thing is that for 10 years, I was terrified of the moment that the film will come out. I mean, I had nightmares that everyone hates me and I have to leave the country.
I had the same thing when I wrote my play, my book about being Palestinian.
And I was so scared, and then the film came out and nothing happened. And my father saw it the night it was aired for the first time in Israel. I was so scared. I took my husband and I said, let's go see another film. We went to the movies. It was Corona time. I mean, it was the end of the Corona, and they just reopened the cinemas in Haifa in Israel. And I said, let's go see a film now. I don't want to know what's happening. And I shut off my telephone. I was so scared. When I started it again, it was just my father, and he said, I think it was a beautiful film.
Oh, that's so great.
And nothing happened. Nobody hates me.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
I think for a lot of us who discuss this topic, we spend a lot of times nights up, wondering who's going to kill us, and then we wake up and everyone's like, oh, you're just a person. I appreciate it.
I think maybe now, today, when I watch the film, like every time I watch it, I see something else in it.
Yeah.
And today I just felt this is such a female film. Like,
That's what I was going to say, actually.
I mean, I brought my heart as a woman, and I said, I don't care about the war. I care about the children. And, you know, suddenly I saw it. I mean, it's so, I don't know if I say it the right way. Like, you say female or feminine, maybe feminine. And I think I'm really proud of it.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
And maybe that's why nobody is angry at me, because, I mean, I teach a class of film back home, and all of my students are white-winged, and I was so scared they will see it and just stop coming to classes. And then I made a talk with them, and I said, I have to tell you something. I made a very leftist film, and you don't have to see it, but you might change your opinion about it. And then they will say, okay. And I mean, they some of them vote Bibi and all that. And now they're sending me, good luck with the screening.
Yeah.
So I think it's because I came with my heart, and I just put it on the table and I say, I care about people and not about the war. And
yeah, I did notice that the men have a very, as demonstrated in this film, of course, I've had this thought before, but men have a very different idea about war and what it
it's like they just want to achieve something, you know? I mean, we did what we had to do, you know, and they have assignments. So that's what interesting for them. But for me, it's like the human aspect.
Yeah, I think we can go to audience questions.
Yeah.
Congratulations on your film. Is it your first time film? No? Okay, well, it doesn't look like a first time film. It's a great story and a story. And the artistic photographs that are embedded in a great documentary film. Thanks. But I want to bring up a different topic. I want to look at those images within as pieces of art. And there's been a whole tradition of, in the past, 10, 15 years, of around the world people suing to get control of the art that belonged to them or belonged to their country.
Yes.
And it was helped along by people whose art was taken, Jewish people whose art was taken during the Holocaust or their former families. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot of other countries in I don't know, the Middle East and
Iraq.
Africa, whatever, that are suing to get back their artworks. So what is the law? Have you looked into the law about getting back art?
Well,
Actually gonna
in order to get this film financed, I mean, I haven't to say I looked into the law is just, I mean, when Channel 8 decided to support it, they brought like 10 lawyers, and I was in the room when they were discussing it, and the head of Channel 8, Rinat Klein, told them, I want to make this film. And she's a woman, by the way, and she said, I want to, and they said, we don't recommend that. But that was like a few years ago. And I had a lawyer. And really to go into the legal aspect of it is, I mean, he advised me not to do it. But I can assure you that it's really, really, there's something called, I don't know how you say that in English. Fair use. Yeah. And fair use is a very specific situation where you can prove that, first of all, you've done everything you can to find the owners, and I did. And second, that there was a very good reason and to use those materials, and that you haven't altered them. And I mean, it was very...
I don't mean your the footage you found. I mean all the other footage.
But it's the IDF archive, and I have to tell you, they do whatever they want. Even if I take them to Supreme Court has for some reason... Listen, when they lost the archive in 1982, they went to international court, and I saw the papers. And international court wrote a jurisdiction saying that Israel that it's cultural looting, and Israel doesn't care. So they just didn't.
I mean, the fact that Bibi just changed it from 70 to 90 because it's been 70 years, it says a lot.
So I mean. They always say the same thing. They say, for security reasons. It's like a mantra. I mean, whatever, when you go to Supreme Court with these things, they always say it's the security of Israel, and that's it. And according to the Israeli law, they don't even have to give their full reason when they decide so.
We have another question here.
Yeah.
Hi, thank you so much. It was a very insightful film.
Thank you.
My question is, it seems like over the 10 years you had a lot of Israeli bureaucracy. You had to deal with a lot of phone calls with IDF soldiers, and I really appreciate that you reached out to the Oslo negotiators. But I was wondering if there was any conversations you had with those people that you didn't include in the film that were insightful or interesting.
Well, I don't know. The minute we closed the film, my memory was deleted. I had many calls with many people, but eventually you have to write a script, and you have to pick some things that will advance the narrative of the film. So I picked the best things. There was 2 days ago, there was a screening here of Tantura. And from the audience, I was sharing that I found material concerning a massacre in Gaza in the 50s. I had versions of the film that included that, but for various reasons, we took it out from the film. Actually, it has something to do with what I said earlier about the human aspect and focusing on the images of people and taking out but I still have this material. So the reason I went first place to Morale, the old guy, the historian, is because he was the only one who admitted that that massacre did happen. So I wanted to interview him before he dies. He died later. He was 93 when I interviewed him, and I came to interview him about the massacre in Gaza. And he was the only one who testified that it happened, while all the other Israelis completely denied it. And this is why I met him, and then when I brought it to the channel, they said, this is not evidence. I mean, it's not enough. And I mean, it's a long story, but that's, like, if I think about one big thing that was left out, it was this. And I'm planning to do something about this material because when I watched Natura, I really felt like I have to do something with the story I found. But, yeah.
This is not a question. This is a sweet story. About 10 years ago, I was in Zabar's Cafe, and I was with my friend, Palestinian movie star Mohammed Bakri, and his son, and we were talking in English, Hebrew, Arabic, and this woman who was standing in front of us turns around, and she recognizes Mohammed, and she says, "Oh, I wondered who these people were who were speaking these three languages." And then Muhammad said to her, or she said to him, "I know your mother." And that's how we met. Najla.
Oh, wow.
So it was such a sweet story because it was the story of a friendship between a Palestinian and a Jewish person. And here was Najla, who really only knew her mother. And where did we connect? In Zabar's Cafe.
Of course. That's where you'll find
That's
it.
a sweet story to make everybody understand.
Can I ask you?
Yeah.
How did you feel watching the film, or?
I felt it was overwhelmingly. I mean, as I said, the footage was. So in this country, and I have a friend here who, as I've talked about this before, there's a sort of a folklorization of our culture in which everyone is sort of wearing thobes, and not that being Eastern or Western is the right way to be as Palestinian, but I was under the impression from my family that there was a society, there were urban people, so the way my father grew up was his dad was a businessman, and they had a nice big house in West Jerusalem, and different class, obviously, than what I've ever encountered here.
Said.
Yes, Edward Said. And so I didn't understand that there was this whole other society of Palestine that existed. I literally, as an American, was convinced that we had lived this way forever, the way we live now, and I couldn't even fathom a society. Now, the funny thing is, the footage of the little girls in school, my mother grew up in Lebanon, not so far away, and that's what her pictures look like. Little girls in school with the bows in their hair and the nice little dress. I mean, again, this is not about Western clothes versus Eastern clothes. It's just that we have been sort of homogenized as a culture, and a lot has been forgotten. Also, in terms of our, we were a varied culture in other ways. We're not all Muslim, all of that stuff, and not all Muslims are devout, and there's so many different aspects to Palestinian society. And for me, that was incredible because I saw it. I saw. I've only seen Palestinian farmers in the context of like someone's taking their land and there's a news report on it. And in this way, I got to see people just living and being. And that's what's been kept from my generation and those younger than us.
Yeah, it reminds me that I was in a program of the Israeli New Film Institute. That program was closed also because of the BDS, but it was the Greenhouse program, and it was putting together Arab filmmakers and Israeli filmmakers, and it was we went to Morocco to meet each other, and I was in a group with two Palestinians from Gaza, two Palestinian filmmakers from Gaza, and we were supposed to help each other, and I showed them the footage from Gaza, and they started crying. And I said, "Why are you crying? It's just fishermen." And And they were like really crying, and they said, we're crying because we've never seen it.
I went to Gaza a long time ago, it was before Oslo, 1992, and that was not a place I would want to go back to, and it's worse now. So
Actually,
I have a friend whose family is from Gaza. They were a large land before Gaza became what Gaza is now. And so I had this idea that it was this place where there was a huge family with a huge, I of course knew it, but never seen it. And I think that that's, and also the way that when people react, when you say the word Gaza there's a connotation, and then you see people just living in.
They said they know where it is. Like they recognize the specific place, the fisherman village, and they've never seen it.
We have a question here.
Hi, I want to say a bit the opposite of what Najla is saying. The first historian, the old man you interviewed, he said they didn't have cameras, they didn't know how to use them, they had no technology,
It's not
I
true.
don't agree
were
with that.
not educated. I know it's not true. But in fact, a lot of the films that were in the PLO archives, a lot of films that were taken in general were of refugees, of, like the misery, the leaving, all that. But in fact, there was a very evolved bourgeois society, capitalists, professionals in Palestine, and you see those pictures only in their family. They're not in the archives. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So that's not a critique of your film, but there's obviously a missing side. Plus, whether in the Jewish experience or the Palestinian experience, the rich people who left, whichever country they left, were not documented. They had money, they left.
That's a very good point.
It's only the poor people who were taken en masse.
Or maybe they had their own cameras and they took photos, but we don't see that.
So there's a story missing there of another side to the society.
I just want to say that it's important for me to say that I never said I found the lost visual history of Palestine. I know some people wanted me to say that. I said no, it's not true. And I'm not pretending to say that this is all what there is. Actually, I'm trying to say this is very little of what there is. I know that in Palestine, they started a museum. I don't know what they have because they don't talk to me, but tomorrow I'm going to show the film in the Palestinian Museum in
Connecticut.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't remember where it is, but
is it nearby?
It's like 2 hours from here.
Connecticut. It's a great place.
It's nice.
Yeah.
So he wrote me a few months ago, and he wanted to show it, and I wasn't sure. But then he wrote me, it's very important for me that an Israeli would come here. So I said, okay. He's nice. Yeah.
We've got time for one more question here.
Hi, actually, I don't have a question. I just have a comment that one of the mefagdim,
Commanders.
the commanders that said, oh, they don't have history. And I think that's the way Israel wants the Israelis to think about Palestinians. That's one. He also said, one of them said that there were no Palestinians. Palestinians were started since 1964. And that's actually the way Israelis think. And that's one way to erase their history and their...
But you know what's incredible about this guy who said that? He's an historian.
Yeah.
Okay, he has a PhD in history, and he was the head historian of IDF for some time. Mm-hmm. And we had an agreement, me and him, that after I cut the film, I will show him his interview. And I was so scared that he will look at it and say, I look really horrible, don't show that. I went to his house, he watched the scene, and then he said, great, that's exactly what I said, where do I sign?
Wow.
Not shocking here. Yes, you can, Carol, but if it's another story.
aunt wrote a book.
Yes, this is true. Hold on.
And I read the book and my mouth dropped open because she lived in a Palestine that I had never heard of before.
Yep.
She used to bop down to Haifa or to Tel Aviv to buy things.
Oh, sure.
Her brother went to school in Egypt because that's where they send good little Arab boys. It was an amazing, and she was a great writer.
She is. She's still with us. Thank goodness.
I mean, I live in Haifa. I mean, the houses they had were incredible. We call them palaces. I live in the area where there were many Arab houses, and we call it palaces. This is how he lives in the palace. I mean,
it's the story of my life that when people ask me what part of Jerusalem my dad was from, I say West Jerusalem, and they say, you mean East Jerusalem? And I'm like, no, I actually mean West Jerusalem. So it's another tale.
There's so much that needs to be told here, and I can't thank you enough, both of you, for sharing and bringing these stories to our community and making both this film and this conversation really so enlightening. Thank you both.
Thank you.
I will share, I agree the film goes hand in hand with Tantura that we screened here, which is available virtually on for this week for the festival as well. And the next film up, The Soldier's Opinion, it also has from a different angle, a connection to, a deep connection to, and I'm for the first time seeing this thread that we, I don't know, either very much on purpose put together here. No, I do not think we thought about it as well, but there's definitely a voice that's coming out of people who are trying to let other narratives and other things that have been swept really under the rug in both Israeli and Palestinian societies come out, and some truth to be heard, or at least other narratives to be heard. Thank you so much for being a part. Thank you.
Thank you very much.